Welcome to Mr. Heaterbox's instructional video on how to install your reproduction tack board, and we're going to be using a TikTok tack in this example, and we're going to take you through the process of putting our replacement board in and doing a quick calibration on the tack. So what you can see here are your basic hand tools you need: a nut driver, a 3/8 and a 9/32, some basic hand tools, and you get a little bit of solder with the kit, and of course the replacement tack board. Alright, so our first job now is to take the tack apart, and then we'll get into the insides and replace the circuit. Okay, this is Brian here, and what Brian's going to do is take the rear can off the tack. This is using the 3/8 nut driver. The thing that you have to look out for is when you're taking the tack apart, note what terminals your points in your power go to. So it only takes a minute to take these apart. You'll find there's a little brass spade terminal that's on the points terminal, and the +12 just has an insulator on it, so that's always the easiest way to tell. In our kit, we don't go by wire color inside because Chrysler never seems to use the same wire color in their various tacks, so it's easier just to always refer to the short terminal and the long terminal, because if you take a close look here, you'll see that once Brian's done taking this apart, the points terminal is physically shorter than the +12 volt power terminal. And of course on these tacks, ground is the metal can. Okay. On the TikTok tack, there's one additional screw at the bottom that goes into the back of the clock mechanism, and Brian's taking that out right now. And once this is out, we'll just slide the back off of the tack carefully. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, off it comes, and you just carefully just give it a wiggle. You'll find the tack can comes right off like that. Alright, and if you take a look here at the back, you'll see that the reproduction circuit board is identical to the one that came in your Chrysler tack, except the Mr. Heaterbox and interior reproduction board, we use higher voltage rated capacitors, better tolerance components as well, and this will give you much better service. Alrighty, so what we're going to do now is remove the tack board. So Brian's going to go ahead here and put the 9/32 on the end of the nut driver. He's going to take the three studs off. Now you'll find one of the three studs is actually used as your ground connection, and if you look at the underside of the circuit board when we're done, you'll see that one of the studs is basically making connection with a ground trace that's on the circuit board, so it's always important that you tighten these down really well. Alright, so he's got the three studs off, and we'll slide that out. And then the next part of the process is, if we take a look at the interior of the tack, we have two clock springs, a front clock spring and a rear clock spring. Alright, you can see the clock springs right there. Brian, if you want to point to them. So there's the rear clock spring, and if you want to spin the tack around just a little bit so we can see it better, other way. There we are. Whoops. You can see that we have a front clock spring. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to remove those wires. As I said before, these wires tend to be different colors in different tacks, so we're just going to not refer to any colors. Alright, so Brian's going to remove the wiring here. He's just going to heat up the terminal. You don't want to use too much heat, just enough so that you can release the wire. And he's going to do this one here. Good. So now what you can do is you can slide the tack board out, and the tack mechanism is all set for our new replacement board. The next task that we have to do is we have an input terminal board that contains the short and long terminal, the one for the points and the +12. We need to transfer that over to our new tack board. And all of our tack boards use the same color of wiring, so what you'll find is the points wire is white, the power wire is red, the front clock spring is yellow and the rear clock spring is black. So what Brian's going to do right now is take the use the soldering iron and take the wires off the terminals. Gotta be careful here, you can burn yourself. So he's just going to remove one, and he's going to remove the other. And if you take a look at the terminal board now, Brian, spin it sideways, please. There you are. You can see that the terminals are different lengths. Alright, and you'll also notice that one tends to be a copper color, and the other one is kind of a silver color. If these are heavily oxidized and corroded, now is also a good time to take like a Dremel tool with a wire wheel brush in the end, or a piece of steel wool, and clean it up. When you're doing this work, do it away from the tack, because the tack has a magnet in it, and if you get any little fibers, it'll tend to pick them up out of the air. So essentially do that away from. Alright, so what Brian's going to do here now is reattach the tack wire. Sometimes an extra hand can help in this part of the process, or a small work vise. It can be a little bit of a pain to do. So he's in the process right now of taking the red wire and putting it onto the long terminal, and then the white wire, which is the tack input signal, onto the short copper colored terminal. Alright. And one thing to note on these boards is these circuit boards will work in an MSD as well as a points configuration. All you have to do is, before you buy it, you tell us, and we will configure the board appropriately so that you can use it with whatever ignition setup that you have. Okay, so now that Brian has the input terminal board soldered on, we're going to go ahead and install the circuit board into the tack and attach the clock spring wires. Alright, so what Brian's going to do now is he's going to install the Mr. Heaterbox and Interior Premium Dash Decals OEM replacement tack board, and he does so by sliding the black clock spring wire under the back plate, and you just have to slide the circuit board onto the 3 terminal studs. And now what he's going to do is he's going to route the front clock spring wire. The routing is quite important, and it would be a good idea when you do yours to make a note on how Chrysler does it, because one of the common things that can go wrong with your install is if you don't route the wire properly, the wire can interfere with the movement of the actual tack mechanism itself, and cause the needle to hang up, or cause the tack needle to stop, say at 5,000 RPM, and go no higher up. So what you want to do is you want to route it back through the way that your tack originally had it, and if you're not comfortable with how the wire's laying down, you can always take a little bit of crazy glue and or epoxy, 5-minute epoxy, and you can tack the wire down to the metal part of the tack, and that way you never have to worry about the wire running interference with the mechanism. If the wire does hit the mechanism, it's not going to cause any damage. It just means you're going to have to open the darn tack a second time. And alrighty, so the front clock spring wire is in place, and Brian's going to solder the rear clock spring wire. As I said previously, the rear clock spring wire is always black, and the front clock spring wire is always yellow. The clock springs terminals are actually on little tiny adjustable circuit boards that you can rotate side to side, which will increase or decrease the tension on the springs. So as part of the calibration process for the tack, one of the things you can do is set your RPM to the correct location indicated by either advancing or decreasing the tension on the clock spring by moving one of these little circuit boards right up here or here. Alright, so now we're going to reinstall the 3 brass standoffs, and then we're ready to go live, hook up the tack, and check our calibration. All of these tack boards are tested on a live tack before they're shipped to you, so that way we know they're good, and the board is roughly in calibration. It's going to vary, of course, from tack to tack, so you always have to do a calibration check. Alright, so we're good to go, and we're going to move over to our tack tester and get this sorted. Alrighty, being a restoration shop, we have the advantage of using a tack tester, but ultimately the tack tester you can use is your vehicle, and all you have to do is hook up power to the large terminal, and then the green wire here points back to our negative of the coil for our tack tester, and then you need to hook up a ground connection to the body of the tack. If you're doing this on your vehicle, make sure that when you're running your vehicle everything's free and clear of all the moving parts and that there's no issues regarding carbon monoxide. You're doing this in a well ventilated spot, and we have a piece of test equipment that gives us known calibrated RPMs. If you're doing it on a vehicle, you need maybe to put a tack dwell meter on or something of the equivalent so that you'll have a reference RPM to go from. So what we're going to do now is we're going to fire up the tack tester. Alright, what we're going to do now is we're going to fire up the tack, and you can see here we have a little tack tester in the corner. You'll see a little arc. Okay. Alrighty, so now the tack's coming up, and what we have the tack tester set on is approximately 1500 RPM. So if you notice, the tack is reading just a little bit high. Now what we'll do is we'll go up to about 4500 RPM. And it's just a little bit on the high side. So what we're going to do is we'll come back to what should be 1500 RPM, and we'll make a clock spring adjustment. Alright. So what Brian's going to do here, spin it around, Brian, is he's going to adjust the rear clock spring by giving it a push. Alright. And what that'll do is that will bring down the 1500 point. Alright. And by doing the clock spring adjustment, there we are. This is floating up just a little bit above, and it takes a little bit of playing around in order to get things set up, but it just shows you the basic idea. And then if everything's reading a little bit on the high side, the next adjustment we can make is we can turn the potentiometer in the back of it. So again, what we'll do is we'll move around over here and give a little bit of a tweak to the potentiometer. Alright, so basically you may have to go back and forth between the clock spring, front clock spring adjustment and the potentiometer. But when you're done, you should get it so that it's all nice and perfectly in balance and at the right RPM. Now what you find is this is an old original Mopar tack we've taken, and you'll notice that as I bring up the RPM, there's a little bit of a lag, and you'll notice the needle's not quite as smooth. This tends to indicate that this tack is a prime candidate for having a rebuild. And in the process of rebuilding it, everything would be cleaned. The mechanism itself would be rehung and rebalanced. The bearings would be polished as well, and any other mechanical adjustments necessary would be made to the tack, and as a result you'd find that it would operate a lot smoother. But we wanted to show you something fairly real life, and the easiest thing to show you was just a fresh off the shelf tack that was in definite need of a circuit board upgrade. Alright, so basically there you have it. That's kind of in a nutshell the process, and then all we have to do now is go back and put the metal can on and retest the tack, and we're good to go. Alright, now in the process of putting this tack back together, we noticed that the terminals are a little bit dirty, and so what we suggest you do is clean it up. We're just going to use a Dremel tool, and you'll find that on the tack and power input terminal board there's a couple of fiber washers, so before you do anything you're best to pull the fiber washers off. So that's what Brian's going to do right now. They're really kind of, it'll be hard to see on this camera, but They're just little fiber washers, and what happens is it allows the post to center themselves in the hole in the can and prevent it from accidentally shorting against the metal body, because that'll stop your tack from operating. So now that he's got those off, Brian has his safety glasses on. He's going to go and just clean up the post with the Dremel tool. An extra minute now for the little things makes a really big difference later on in terms of overall operation. Why take your dash apart yet another time for an intermittent connection later on if you can sort all your problems out right now? Alright, so what Brian's going to do is he's going to finish cleaning this off, and then what we'll do is put the can on the tack, and we're basically good. Alright, so Brian's now finished cleaning up the terminals. While he was at it, he also did the points terminal as well that gets bolted on, and he cleaned out the other contacts up also. So now we're just going to go and put the rest of the standoffs back in the tack. So essentially reassembly is just the reverse of how you took it all apart. Again, when you put the little terminal board in with the points terminal and the power terminal, you have to make sure that you have those perfectly centered with the aid of those insulating washers, so that those terminals don't touch the metal housing, or else your tack won't work, or you might blow a fuse. So Brian's putting the fiber insulators in. If they're broken, you can give us a call. We manufacture those insulators. Alright, and then he's going to now drop the circuit board into the terminal board into the housing. Sometimes that's actually the worst part of the process, is kind of getting that all in there. But all you're looking for to do is really get the studs coming through, and then once you can get it through, you can grab it now and get everything organized. What you'll find with the housing itself is the housing will only fit together in one direction because of how they've offset the three standoffs, so you can't get that wrong. It's really most important right now that you just get the terminals in straight. Alrighty, so the little terminal board's in, and Brian's got it centered with the fiber washer, so now you just put on an insulator. In this case, on the short terminal, which is the points, you add the wiring terminal and one of the copper lock washers, and then the 3/8 brass nut. Alright. Snug it down, and then once you snug it down, what you want to do is take a look and make sure that the other terminal is still centered within the hole, and if not, you can just kind of tease it over and have it lined up perfectly, as you can see right there. Alright, so Brian's just going to go ahead and basically put on the rest of the lock washers and nuts, and we're done the tack process. We'll hook it up and give it one more run when we're done. Alright, we're back for just the final test. The tack is now all back together. Brian's going to hook up the power and the ground and the distributor signal to it. So if you want to go ahead there, Brian. Power's going to get a ground on the metal body. The short stud with the electrical contact on it is the points. The long insulated stud is the power. So what we're going to do is we'll just give it a quick fire up and see how everything goes. Alright, we're back, and we have the tack all together. Brian's hooked up a ground on the body of the tack. Power's going to the long insulated post, and he's going to hook up the point signal right now, and we're just going to do one final operational check just to make sure the tack is functioning. So we'll just power it up on our little handy dandy tack tester here, and if you take a look, what we'll do is we'll just sweep it through. Normally if a tack's been rebuilt, it'll be a little bit smoother response in this. You can see it's a little bit jumpy in spots. And with an overhaul, it can be made to run a lot smoother. This is the common lack of response that a lot of people complain about with the TikToks. Also too, the fact that it's got the larger mass needle doesn't help the process either. But at any rate, you can see the tack is now working with our replacement board. So we hope that you've enjoyed this video. And if you have any questions, you can contact Brian or Brent at mrheaterbox.com or premium-decals.com. Our phone number is 613-532-2587, or you can email us at mrheaterbox@kos.net. Thanks very much, and we hope that this has helped you.